You know, when I was little, I had to go a lot back and forth between my grandparents and my mother's care due to my mother's addiction, and due to that, I did my best to cherish every single moment I had with her. Even though she had addiction take over her, she was an extremely compassionate and loving person. Anytime she could possibly show me kindness, she did. Even when she was homeless, she still somehow scraped together enough change to buy me Christmas presents. And I had no idea. And the place she was a homeless resident in was DC. She was a homeless resident in DC. She survived off the compassion of others, while also being near crippled and going through addiction. DC is the place where she lived on the streets, where she lived in crummy apartments, and where she ultimately died. My grandfather worked in DC for all of my life at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. He would take me to take your child to work day because ultimately my grandparents would have to take care of me due to my mother's addiction and my father's problems. I've lived in the DMV, the metro area, my entire life. DC food trucks is just common eating. It's great eating, but it's common eating. 50% of my friends live in DC. DC's in my blood. It is the city that's ever present. The way people who live on the beach look at the beach, it's like, oh, that's a common occurrence, so it's just like whatever. It's like, it's cool, but I'm used to it, is the way I looked at the Washington Monument. It's the way I looked at the Lincoln Memorial. It's the way I looked at every museum in DC. Because it's just there. It's always been there. Same with the Capitol building. What's supposed to be the center of our democracy. The capital of the most powerful planet on the earth. And what I saw this weekend was a disgusting rejection of democracy, the rule of law, what our community members want, and everything we're supposed to as a country stand for. I mean, we're supposed to. Have we ever really? But we're supposed to. The irony of having people throw the word treason at me for just voting differently than them in a democracy, while they rush the Capitol building, knock down its doors, and fly Confederate flags, and fill the building with white nationalists, is bizarre to me. And don't tell me, oh, really, white nationalists? Yes, white nationalists. We're talking people with screwdriver hoodies. We're talking people with a 6 million isn't enough t-shirts. We're talking America First flags. We're talking Confederate flags. We're talking Nicholas J. Fuentes. We're talking Baked Alaska. There was this instance online where there was this facial recognition software that thought, and the conservatives dragged us around town, thought they had found out that actually it was Antifa that did all of this, because this facial recognition software showed that this person in the crowd was actually on Philly City's Antifa's page. We got him. It's actually Antifa. What they failed to realize, but I realized instantly, is that person they're showing in the picture from the Philly City Antifa's page is standing next to the most notorious white nationalist, one of the most notorious white nationalists in this country, one of the people who started the white student, the White Students Union, the White Students Union. And what you realize is, oh, of course Philly City Antifa doesn't post pictures of themselves. The whole concept of the black bloc is anonymity. They were posting pictures of white nationalists. So if anything, these conservatives were unintentionally promoting information, just showing that this protest, this riot inside the building, was riddled with white nationalists. The treatment I got while I was there, by just wearing a shirt or a hoodie of the opposite side, was quite telling. You know, the communist stuff I expected. But being accused of treason for just wearing a hoodie and saying I voted for the other guy, being spit at, being called the F slur, all the things that supposedly the left, the cancel culture evil left, does all the time. And you know what? I will say, there are instances where the left has treated people, moderate conservatives, horribly. But you can't just say, well, look, I robbed this bank, but it's okay because look over there, that person robbed this bank. You can't excuse that by just saying, turn around, look at yourself. You're just diverting. You're just trying to get somebody to concentrate somewhere else. But what's really getting me is the fact that so many people have turned on a dime when it comes to this. Turned on a dime on what they supposedly believed in. Not only on democracy, but what they've been harping on about for months. Oh, I am so disgusted at how this Walmart was burnt down. That's terrorism. I'm so disgusted. This person punched this person. It's so disgusting. That's terrorism. It's political violence. It's terrorism. But then people storm in, beat up the cops, push them out of the way, rush up, knock down the door of a Capitol building, fly in with the Confederate flag 150 years too late since Fort Sumter. Charge the media. Call them a bunch of F slurs and take their media equipment and smash it after pelting them. And then bombs are planted across the city. And that isn't terrorism. That isn't a riot. That's just a oopsie. That's just a bad mistake. So many people who were so emotionally invested in a KFC or a Walmart or a Rite Aid being burned down seem to not care at all as Murder the Media is scrawled on the doors inside the Capitol building. As white nationalists take pictures in Nancy Pelosi's office. As our legislature has to flee into tunnels. As they delay the vote on certifying Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. The rightful president of the United States, mind you. All those concerns faded away. And they vanished. Because it never really was about the Wendy's. never really was about the Rite Aid. It was about power. And I don't like when someone's community is burned to the ground. I had to watch last time as the Proud Boys came into our community and burned the property of black churches and tore down BLM monuments put up by communities in grieving. This time, though, as far as I know, they didn't burn any property of black churches. They just reenacted George Floyd's death in front of a black church. Insulting the humanity of black people and the religious institutions in our community. But why should I be surprised that that occurs when Nicholas J. Fuentes is such a welcome member in this movement to stop the steal, stop the fraud, rightfully make Donald Trump get another term? 4 or 5 years ago, when Donald Trump was elected, I was not that happy. The last conversation I had with my mother before she passed was her fear of losing health care. But I bit my tongue and dealt with it. Because we live in a democracy. And even though he didn't win the popular vote, even though he rejected that he lost the popular vote with these claims of his, that all the illegals voted, anytime he ever lost in a primary, there was something wrong, whether Ben Carson or someone else did it, or it was the illegals who all voted, as he said, even after he won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote, and this time it's own other thing. But even after that, I bit my tongue, and I just kept marching forward. Even though the Russian government tried to spread disinformation, that doesn't change who won. You can't just redo that election. You gotta keep marching forward. And you know what? We did what we're supposed to do. As they, of course, laughed at the lefties who couldn't accept the loss. We march 4 years later. Trump loses after leading the country into recession, after butchering a health crisis, after calling for Muslims to be banned from the United States, after calling for the bombing of civilians, after messing up his agreements, his negotiations with North Korea, after backstabbing the Kurds, after kicking all these people off food stamps, after targeting trans people. After all of this and many more, I could go on endlessly. He loses, fair and square, not only the popular vote, but the Electoral College vote. He lost both, and he didn't lose it by a close margin. It was over 300, over 300 Electoral College votes, 306, and millions upon millions when you look at the popular vote. But in his mind, he couldn't lose. Even beforehand, he was talking about how if he loses, it was probably rigged. He was always setting it up that if he lost, he could reject it no matter what is said. They attacked mail-in ballots for coming in too late, even though the concept of the red mirage was here for a very long time and was talked about openly for a very long time. And when Democrats pushed legislation in states like Pennsylvania to open the ballots early so we wouldn't have to wait for that, so there wouldn't be that type of confusion, it was rejected by local Republican parties. And in that same state, Pennsylvania, currently, a Democrat who won election and was certified and went to court to make sure it was certified and won that court case is still not being sworn in with no date to have that person sworn in. So it isn't only a Trump problem, by the way. It's a Republican problem generally. It's a problem with parties all over the state. Some state parties better than others. And I can't also completely wipe the Democrats of this either. I live in Maryland. States gerrymandered to all hell. That's just the truth. That's the blatant, clear-cut truth. But people enabled these theories. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, they enabled these theories, entertained them, would point to the affidavits, and then we'd see the people who signed affidavits come up and ramble endlessly, saying nothing of interest. We'd see people come up with endless Twitter thread conspiracy theories only to be debunked time and time again. We'd see conspiracies about Dominion voting, Hugo Chavez, or whatever. And it'd be taken to court time and time and time again. And the Trump campaign would lose over and over and over and over because they could just not accept the fact that they lost an election. Which, you know what? Happens in a democracy. But it didn't matter. Democracies do not function if one of the parties cannot accept loss. And due to this, the pot was stirred for a firestorm, but it wasn't already just post-election. When we shouldn't be surprised that there were so many extremists in that crowd for this event that the President of the United States himself shouted out on Twitter. If you are a person who calls for the banning of Muslims for the United States, to bomb the families of terrorists, also known as civilians, to commit war crimes against the state of Iran and the bombing of cultural sites, you're so ready to backstab the Kurds. You call people like El-Sisi your favorite dictator, to help the Saudi royal family cover up the murder of journalists. Someone who constantly attacks the media. And we saw the result of that with Murder the Media scrawled on doors inside the Capitol building, and the media being pelted and charged and having their equipment smashed outside of it. So much hatred for the press that just the presence of the media inspired people to violence. It's not a surprise when you look at all these factors put together that it created a bomb that was ready to burst. The authoritarianism, the bigotry, the advocacy to commit some of humanity's worst atrocities. Trump's pounding of the chest on torture, for example. And then he calls for them all to come after telling organizations like the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. Well, you know what? Yesterday, they stopped standing back. And we saw the results of those words. And now 4 people are dead. Another body not at the dinner table. Some people with sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, contributing members to communities. It isn't just impacting one lives, it's impacting the lives of dozens upon dozens of people who knew these people, worked with these people, loved these people, friends and family. And it seems every step of the way, Trump only made it worse. He only made it worse. When it was Lafayette Square, that fucking scumbag was so ready to send out forces to beat up the Australian press and peaceful protesters so he could get a photo op with the Bible. Oh, Jesus would be proud. Beating up the press so you can get a photo op by a church. He was so ready to send them out then. But when There were people charging the very center of our democracy, the Capitol, busting down the doors. Then, when it wasn't a fucking Wendy's in Timbuktu, he hesitated to send the National Guard, and Pence had to do it. When Larry Hogan, my state's governor, wanted to send our National Guard to assist them, they were stopping them and delayed it. And we saw that delay of presence and the result of it as the situation got worse and worse. Until eventually we saw every type of cop come by. We saw unmarked car, marked cars, police vans, police on motorcycles, police on foot, riot police. Of course, National Guard troops. Police not in uniform. But it was only after that delay, and valuable time was lost. Valuable time that people at the Capitol spent busting down doors and tearing through the offices of our legislatures, trying to break further into the building. So they stole stuff from the building and eventually assaulted the press as bombs were planted across the city. When it's a crowd of people peacefully protesting in the press, Trump is quick to send out the police to dispatch of them. When it's a crowd of his supporters that he incited, that he pumped full of these theories that got them to a boiling point, and he sends them to the Capitol, then he's gonna hold them back. While the Proud Boys are no longer standing back and standing by, that's what he tells the National Guard to do. Let them run wild. Let them rough them up a little. I could go on a long spiel about stochastic terrorism, or I could point out the fact that Rudy Giuliani said trial by combat. I could go on about a million things. But at the end of the day, the thing that gets me the most was how much I saw people talking about people from outside other people's communities coming in, outside agitators, the Antifas, the BLMs, a bunch of white kids from other communities coming in to start stuff. And they're gonna mess with your community. They're gonna bust down your door. They're gonna burn down your CV. They're gonna cause chaos. They're gonna attack your police. It's so bad. And you know what? I don't like it when people burn down communities. I don't like it when people assault others. I don't like that. But then, when it's Proud Boys who come into our community and charge us, attack us, burn the property of black churches, who tear down BLM monuments put up for the victims of police brutality for our community in mourning. Others plant bombs in our community, break into the legislature, assault the press, threaten people with execution for treason, fill the streets with white nationalists. Where's all this talk of outside agitators now when it's DC, a state that voted like 88 to 92% for Biden? Well, now that it's a Democrat city, oh, just let them run wild. These Democrats had it coming. There was so much hype around the pain these other communities experience, and I don't want to downplay them. But then when it's our pain, it doesn't matter. I remember going through the streets on that day and seeing people still sleeping on the sidewalk as these people, 60% of whom didn't have masks, walked past them to go to the Capitol to start shit. To have 6 p.m. curfews instituted. Curfews they're gonna have to follow. Instead of coming here to maybe help those homeless residents on the street, they come out here to reject the results of a democratic election. Where's the hype around outside agitators? I don't see it. And you know, I know from my roundtables that I do have conservatives and right-wingers in my community. And I just have to ask you, I'm not going to lambaste you for jumping ship on Trump now if you didn't do it before. If you didn't do it when he was calling for banning Muslims from the United States, or bombing civilians, or any one of the things he's done in office, or undermining the foundation of our very democracy with his baseless conspiracy theories. Retweeting videos of supporters saying white power, or any number of things he's done while in office. I'm not gonna roast you or go after you for that. You can still jump off this train. The Trump train is currently in station. Even Kelly Loeffler jumped. Mitch McConnell seems to be jumping the whole operation. And he's pressuring others to do so. You don't need to be with Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. You can still be a conservative or right-winger and just jump off that train. Go for a different movement. If you're a fiscal conservative, he's increased the deficit by how much? If you believe in law and order, look what he just caused in our nation's capital, the foundation, the center of our democracy. If you're big on Christian values, his support for these horrific wars and in his groups that he's told to stand back and stand by, and then now have burned the property of black churches in DC, or recreate the murder of George Floyd in front of these churches. Or what about what we talked about earlier, Lafayette Square, when he used the Bible as a prop, as a cudgel to beat peaceful protesters before getting a photo op in front of a church. There is a million legitimate reasons for you to jump the movement, even if you don't agree with me. And I'm not going to shame you for taking so long to do so. People come to different conclusions through different processes. I didn't come to my faith through just being taught as a kid or having a long theological debate. I came to it after watching my mother pass from heroin use. People come to conclusions in unique and different ways. And I just hope you at least reconsider this diehard support for the man. Maybe just re-examine some of the claims with a more critical lens and try not to walk back from your conclusions, but starting from a point and then walking forward to see where you end up if the election was fraudulent. Or if he's a president of law and order and calling to commit war crimes overseas, and he sent that mob into DC. I'm genuinely asking you to reconsider. I know this won't get all of you. It won't get most of you. It probably won't even get half of you. Maybe it'll only be one or two. I've seen a lot of the same apologia for what went on, or downplaying of what went on. And I know a lot of people, conservatives I know, won't listen to this or will reject it. See it as just, I don't know, me just appealing to emotions or whatever. But I am genuinely making a request for you to re-examine where you are right now. I know you've invested a lot of time and energy into the positions you hold right now. And you've spent the last 4 or 5 years of your life with these political views and following this person. But times change, people can change, and you can change.